Alex here again. Welcome to the end of the first year of this channel. Now, that's a little bit misguiding because I have been posting on this channel for, I don't know, 5-6 years or something like that. But it was always postings that were just videos linked to my blog that dealt with, other subject matter than I mostly deal with here. But pretty much as a New Year's resolution last January, I decided to go full steam ahead with a video channel where I would do a lot of the DIY stuff that I do, but switch to a video format, so more of like a vlog than a regular blog. Open it up for Patreon subscriptions, really put a lot of time into it and see how it goes, gauge interest, because as you've seen, if you've watched the videos on my channel, which assumedly you have if you're watching this, a lot of the stuff I do is about like the super nerdy details, and I wasn't sure how well that would go over. So I set moderate metrics based on research that I did of similar channels and their startup time and things like that. And basically I hit all of those with the first year. So that's encouraging, and that's going to lead into continued development on this channel. So we would call that phase 1, the first year, just feeling out, testing the water, seeing how it works, getting everything set up. Phase 2 is going to be kind of taking it to the next level. So expanding the projects, getting on a more regular schedule, being more detailed about like getting background notes posted and things like that, as well as, thanks to Salvatore being the 20th subscriber on my Patreon, I'm going to start doing live streams, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The format I like to take is, rather than putting like lots of little like short 5 to 7 minute videos like a lot of channels do, I like to do longer form videos that go into more depth, and then instead of breaking those videos down into chunks, I'll put a time index in the video description so you can click to the areas of interest. Then I like to kind of group that loosely with other series that have interrelated technologies or interrelated disciplines, things like that. So for example, if it's like some kind of microcontroller project, I might link like 3D printing to, some other type of a thing. I think of the whole thing as like kind of a spider web with little nodes on it that are interconnected by the technologies and concepts behind them. And I want to bring that more into focus in the coming year, because things were kind of like haphazard in the first year, but I was just trying to kind of pump out as much information as I possibly can while getting used to the format and the responses to the questions, engaging interest, and scheduling parts ordering and things like that. Now, the parts ordering that's a big deal for me, because I don't pre-record these series usually. Sometimes I do, but for the most part I take them chunk by chunk, and as I'm finished one part, I'll release it and then get to working on the next part. And I kind of try to plan ahead for everything I need, because as you know, you can order things straight from the source, which is usually overseas, and it'll cost like $1. But if you get something so that you can get it in a few days, ordering domestically, it'll be like $7 or $10 or something like that. But you don't have to wait the usually like 3 to 5 weeks or so seems to be the window, sometimes more, sometimes a little bit less. But if it's like a single thing I need to get a video out, I'll just say, okay, well, I'll take the hit. I'll order it on Amazon or something like that and pay $7 instead of $1. But if it's like 10 things I need for a video, well, then you're talking about paying $70 instead of $10, which is beyond the means of this channel right now. So I'm going to try to get that a little bit more organized in a future, plan ahead a little bit more, and try to pre-record more stuff. And as we're talking about recording formats, I also want to get some shorter form videos out there. Now, I already have the 5-minute data dump, which is where I try to take some relatively nerdy concepts, strip it down and distill it to just the basics, and cram that into 5 minutes plus a little bit on the beginning and the end for the intro and the outro. And I've kind of veered away a little bit from that lately because it's such a constrictive format, but I may widen that out to like 10 minutes and try to get content out more frequently. So the goal would be maybe like a 5 or 10 minute video once or twice a week, and then a larger video at the end of the week. I haven't quite figured out the schedule yet or how that's going to work, but we'll see how it goes. And I am just a one-man production team here doing all of the planning, the ordering, the recording, the editing, and all the testing. And the testing is the unpredictable part. So if you've been following the 32-bit series, I wanted to do a board review in there, so I used the rearm board. Now, since 32-bit Marlin is a pretty new thing, there are a lot of features that aren't supported. And that ties into the review of those boards, because when you do a review of a board, you have to say, okay, this doesn't work and that doesn't work. But you're like, well, that's not necessarily the fault of the board, it's just because it's not supported in the firmware, which leads me to, well, why isn't it supported in the firmware? So I go check, and I see that, something like the LCD screen with certain operation modes is blocked because it had some goofy issues. Okay, well then I'm going to order an LCD screen, run a bunch of tests on it, see exactly what the problem was at the root, and then move on from there, see if I can actually fix it. So I think some of that I'm going to have to strip down a bit. I spent the last 2 weeks or so testing various options, I ordered a, various PC panels for that rearm review, which wasn't just for the rearm, because it's not my job to do product support and development for projects that I'm not a part of, but as a service to the community, I would like to say, hey, well, while I'm looking at this, while I'm neck deep in all this code, I might as well see if I can figure a few things out. And one of the things I did post up was how to do software SPI and get all of those various giblets working, which isn't optimal, and there are some quirks, and it's not guaranteed to work all the time, but, maybe it's a step in the right direction. So anyway, I have to kind of learn to let some of those things go and just say, this is not working right now. Maybe I'll put out another video where I show you the steps that I'm taking to try to get it working, and then hand it off to the actual developers to, develop that. But anyway, so speaking of new material as well, and types of videos, I do want to branch out the subject matter a little bit while keeping it connected through, like I said, background concepts or technologies. So I don't want to do a 32-bit board and then have all of my 32-bit development stuff, have my, software toolchain all set up and my debugger and all that jazz. Take that out, set it up for just the board, then tear it down, and then later on do a video on, maybe like a 32-bit Arduino board where I have to pull all that back out again, set up the development environment again, get all the hardware set up again. So it will be better to jump back and forth between related concepts where I don't have as much of that wasted time tearing down and setting up, which can take days. And as you've probably seen in the videos, I don't have a whole lot of room right here. Basically, I can touch this wall over here. I have about 10 feet that way, and it's 8 feet wide. It's basically a storage room with a couple workbenches set up so that I can work on this, and then at my computer station right here, I pop a camera up and record these videos. So it's not optimal for anything, specifically getting multiple projects going on at the same time, because I just can't leave them set up. That slows things down significantly, and I think with better planning, I can get better time management that way, as well as streamlining the recording process. And as you've been seeing with the up-Z and down-Z quality of the video and audio on this channel over the last year, I've experimented with a lot of different setups just to see what's best in terms of balancing quality against time that it takes to accomplish it. So the ideal would be set up a camera here, maybe a B-roll camera there, and then a camera on the project. Record all three streams simultaneously with a separate high-quality audio stream. Sync them all up in the video editor so I can cut back and forth, and then add in the diagrams and the little cutscenes and the titles and that sort of stuff. Having a permanent setup like that is not something I can do in my current situation. So it's usually one channel, splice in some other B-roll from a handheld, and then drop in the titles. And that's really because I don't have the dedicated hardware to do that, and I don't have the space to leave a dedicated recording setup all the time. So the fewer pieces I have to set up and tear down between each video so that I can actually do work, the better for me. But that's just all to say that I've gone through a lot of iterations and experiments, and we'll see where things go in the next year as I get things more solid. And as I get more Patreon supporters and more views on the channel, that does mean that there is more money coming into the channel that I can use to get better gear or experiment with different kinds of gear, because you could have the best stuff in the world. If it doesn't work for your situation, it's no good. Let's talk about projects that are going on and projects that will be coming up. Now, I'm currently juggling 3 or 4 different projects, and then I have 12 that are beginning to be filmed in the works. So that's plenty of stuff. That'll take me probably through the next 6 or 7 months if I don't add any other things. So it's very possible that I already have the framework for the entire 2019 year set up. But the most current thing right now is that we're in the middle of the 32-bit series, and that, as I said, is going to spiderweb out into other areas as well. And as an additional curveball that's been thrown into things, as I mentioned, because of my 20th Patreon subscriber, Salvatore, now I'm going to start doing live streams. So I do have to pause some of that development and work on getting the live streams done. Now, I have a concept for the first one, and I'm still figuring out a format for the others. And I've tossed some questions out to my Patreon subscribers, and I'll let them discuss it a little bit. And they've been messaging me and talking on the site about some possibilities. So we'll see how that works out. But as far as the first one goes, I'll release a separate video detailing what we're going to be doing and what the time and the date are. It'll probably be in a few weeks. Ideally, I'd like to get it done in January so I can get on a schedule of doing at least one of these a month, at least for the immediate time being. But I'm not sure because I did have to order some parts from overseas, and they would have to come in, well, they would have to come in the ideal time frame of 2 to 3 weeks just for me to have them in time, let alone seeing if they're going to work, making sure they ship the right thing and that sort of stuff. Plus, I need to figure out the camera setup. I need to get OBS set up or whatever it is I decide to use, probably OBS, etc., etc. But for that project that I'm going to be doing on the live stream, I have to design a couple gizmos and thingy-doos. I'll be more descriptive later. And for that, I need to run some preliminary tests. So to economize time, I'm probably going to switch gears from the 32-bit for at least a little bit of time to work on those. Now, the 32-bit is going to relate to the live stream, but I need to look in a couple different areas just so that I can have those videos up to build up to the live stream so that what I'm doing makes sense. The downside is I have to start with those from scratch. There's going to be a little bit of development time, so I will try to get a couple small videos out while I'm doing this for the larger videos, but there's probably 2, maybe 3 that I have to start in the meantime before I get to that. There are also a couple areas that I haven't really touched on at all that I really want to work into the channel that I'm going to try to hit on this year. More general microprocessor knowledge I think is important, as well as, well, general processor knowledge when you're talking about like single board computers and just general computing machines, as well as coding for them. Now, luckily, we're used to the Arduino interface, which uses a whole lot of C++ or a C++-like language, which is what we're going to be using a lot in various coding for general computing platform, so that relates very well. I do want to work with audio concepts a little bit more and audio gear design. If you have checked out my old blog, you'll see that there's a lot of DIY recording and DIY coding and things like that, because that's the world that I worked in for the last decade and a half. And I would like to throw some of that in there. DSP coding, how to do decent audio recording, mixing, mastering at home, maybe do a little of a project, talk about DIY gear design and building, as well as getting into more like guitar specific technologies like guitar amps, how vacuum tube amps works, like the ins and outs of like the hardware of guitar pedals and things like that. And that's not something that I'm going to take like 3 months and just work exclusively on that. I plan to work on that type of things, weaving it in and out of the other concepts. So for example, talking about a 32-bit 3D printing board tied in with some videos on 32-bit programming in your Arduino IDE or VS Code or whatever, and then tie that into like some kind of microprocessor for a audio related technology. I also plan to hit on other subjects in 3D printing that I haven't seen in many other places. So the kind of rallying cry, the slogan for this channel was like catching the knowledge that falls through the cracks. And that means taking a lot of the concepts, like especially the more nerdy ones, or the more heady, or the math, or the more involved type concepts, and making videos for those. Because there are plenty of channels that cover the basics or even getting into the nuts and bolts setups of things, but the concepts behind them are often lacking, and those are the important things if you want to develop a community of makers and not just a community of consumers. So anyway, I've rambled long enough. Thank you very much for making this channel possible. As always, I have my contribution and subscription links in the video description below. Anything you do there helps out the channel, helps it expand, helps it grow, and helps me get better gear, as well as more of a discretionary budget to test out better parts. So thank you for the encouraging first year. Here's to the second year. Until I get a next video out, get out there and make something awesome.